Minasan konnichiwa, and welcome to the Board Game Dojo's Import or Not series, where we take a look at games from Asia and let you know if they're worth your hard-earned money to import or not. Today, we are taking a look at a two-player trick-taking game from the designer of Jekyll vs. Hyde and Ptolemy, and it's called Hipparchus. Let's see if this game lands among the stars, or if, like Pluto, it needs to be excluded from your collection. This is Hipparchus on today's Import or Not. Hipparchus is a two-player trick-taking game in which you cannot rearrange your hand. As you can also see, the cards in this game do not have a value listed on the top of them. Instead, the value is the amount of cards you're playing in a set. So for example, this set would be worth 3. This is a 3 of sun, but this is a 2 of moon. Tricks are must follow in terms of suit, but a must not follow in terms of number. So if I play this 2 of moon here, my opponent must play a moon, but they cannot play a 2 of moon. Sets go up to a maximum of 3, so they could play a 1 moon or they could play a 3 moon. If in your hand you have a set of 4, like I have here, where I have 4 suns in a row, I cannot play all 4 at the same time. I would need to split them up. Otherwise, you're not allowed to actually split up a group. So if I only had, for example, set of 3, I could not play this as a 2 of sun and a 1 of sun. I would need to play this as a 3 of sun. Like in other trick-taking games, whoever's the highest value wins if they're playing of the same suit. The winner will take the cards and put them in their score pile, separating based on the suit that they have. Now, something interesting happens when the opponent cannot actually match the suit. In this case, let's say that the opponent either doesn't have a moon or they only have 2 of moons to play, which, as I said before, they cannot play the same value of the same suit. They can then play whatever they want. So let's say they play a 1 of sun. But then the values of these cards actually don't matter at all. We will take a look at the score piles of each player. The player who played the moon will take a look at their moon pile. Let's say, for example, in this case, that I have 1 moon in my score pile. We'll also take a look at our opponent. And let's say in this example that our opponent has 1, 2, 3 suns in their score pile. The value actually takes up this. So they in fact played a kind of 3 of sun. So they have 3 and I have 1. Whoever has the lower value wins. So I actually take the trick. I'll put my moons into the score pile and I'll take the sun into a different pile. This will continue on until somebody runs out of cards and then it is time to score. Scoring is based off of who won each suit and how many the other player took. Let's say that these are the final scores in this game, in which I have 3 moons, my opponent has 0, my opponent has 3 suns, and I have 1 sun. You'll figure out who has won that suit, and you score the amount of points your opponent took of that suit. So in this case, I won the moon because I took 3, my opponent scored 0. However, because they took 0, I get 0 points for that. My opponent wins sun 3-1, and they score 1 point because I took 1 sun. Whoever scores the most points wins. And that's how to play Hipparchus. I'm going to clean this up, and then I'll tell you what we think of this game. Oh, Hipparchus, there's so much we like about you, but there's also a lot we don't like about you. How to begin? Well, let's actually go through this as Suma-chan experienced this, because I had played this before it got this published copy. So I had already had experience with the game. In fact, I had already done a review on it on our podcast. But this time for this video review, let's go through it as Suma-chan experienced it, because it's a little bit different when you have the printed version. The first thing that we noticed about this game is when we opened the box, and holy smokes, you could fit a whole other game in here. What on earth is going on here? I thought we were past this in box design. Is the point that you're supposed to put Ptolemy and Hipparchus in the same box? Like, this is just ridiculous. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's clearly for the rulebook, right? But no, there is no printed rulebook in this game. It is a QR code on the back, which kind of makes sense because they advertised that it's a trilingual rulebook with English rules and Japanese rules included. So that means that they got it professionally translated in multiple languages, right? Right? No. We scanned the QR code and right away we got the Korean rulebook, which is fine. We'll switch over to the English button. Very clearly, the rulebook was not written by somebody who speaks fluent English, and I thought that was a bit strange. So we go to the Japanese rulebook, and Suma-chan and I look at the Japanese rulebook, and it also very clearly is not written by somebody who speaks Japanese. So we take a look and then we go, okay, let's you know what, some of these things are a little bit difficult to understand in both English and in Japanese. So let's try going to the Korean and just switching on Google Translate and seeing if it works that way. And then we noticed that it was the exact same thing. It was the same thing to go to the Korean rulebook page and turn on Google Translate as it was to go to the English rulebook and the Japanese rulebook, which tells us that that is exactly what they did. And I don't want to harp on it too much, but for two people that are freelance translators, it is a bit of a sore spot for us. Yes, technically it is true. You have an English rulebook and you have a Japanese rulebook, but when it is the same as Google Translate, exactly the same, that is not what the kind of assumed understanding is. If I am advertised a game and it says, you know what, my native language is Korean, but I got this translated into English, I am expecting to get a game that was looked at by somebody that speaks English so that they could translate it from Korean to English, and I am easily able to understand the rules of the game. That is the general acceptance in board gaming and in other industries, not I put it through a machine translation. And yes, I can understand that having it as a separate tab could be convenient for many people who maybe don't have that extension on their phone or maybe on their laptop, whatever it might be. But then put it on the top that this is a machine translation on there, especially like not even like a good machine translation, but Google Translate. Because that in combination with typos makes the first impression of this game very messy. And that was how Suma-chan entered into it before we had even started playing. She had this on her mind. This website, this rulebook was a mess. And so this game is going to be a mess. There is a reason that Apple has invested so much time into making sure the packaging and everything works so that when you're opening it, you already have an experience and you're already in a good headspace when you start opening the laptop or the iPhone. Suma-chan was in the opposite headspace when we started playing this game. But I wanted to convince her that, hey, this game is actually quite fun. Please give it a chance. And once we started playing, we did start enjoying it because there is so much interesting stuff here in the box. First of all, the fact that you can't rearrange your hands is a great touch into this trick-taking game. And the rule that in combination with that, however many cards you have in that set is the value of that. That's really cool. It makes you kind of think about things differently. It makes you think of things a little bit differently. The single cards that you have in your hand, do you want to get rid of them now, or do you want to try to get them so that later they combine? So you're going to play a card in the middle of the two. And this, combined with the endgame scoring, that you only score based on how many cards your opponent takes of that suit, makes you go, okay, I want to play these threes so that I win the trick, but I don't want to play them too early. Because if I play them too early, my opponent is just going to give up on that suit, and it won't matter how many of the suit I take because they're only going to take 0 or 1 card in that suit. So I definitely don't want to do that. I don't want to tip my hand. And as you start playing these tricks and start to get the hang of it, there becomes a flow state that happens between you and your opponent, with both of you starting to score cards continually and starting to get a shift and understanding of, okay, they're going for sun, I'm going for moon. But then something weird happens. And there was never a time, even after a few games, that the way that the offsuit wins worked didn't kind of put brakes onto the flow of the game. Everything else about this game is quick, it's snappy. You don't have to think about too many things because there's only a certain amount of things that, based on what your opponent is doing, you can do. And yet, as soon as that happens where there's an offsuit, you always kind of have to stop and think about it. Okay, they played a 2 sun. I cannot play a 2 sun. I cannot do this. So if I play an earth, let's see how many earths do they have. Okay, they have the thing. Okay, I'm on the moon. Okay, they have this many. It's not that it takes a long time, but it takes you out of the flow that you're kind of in. It puts the brakes on a game that feels otherwise quick but strategic. And that's the thing. This mechanic here feels like a rough edge on a game that otherwise feels pretty dang smooth. But that's actually pretty expected for this designer. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Geonil or Geonil. If you know, please put it in the comments so that I can pronounce it right from now on. But every one of their games has this kind of sense of everything feels so smooth and so perfect, but then there's something that isn't quite sanded down. And I think that's why they have a lot of fans. Jekyll versus Hyde feels a bit unbalanced between Jekyll and Hyde. Ptolemy can feel completely random and out of your control. Hipparchus has this weird offsuit scoring. Everything else in these games feels like something you would see from a big publisher. It's smooth and methodical. Every rule feels like it was play tested and perfected, and yet there's just this little bit of a thing. There's just this little eccentricity that just is like, what is going on? And I think that that's one of the things that makes this designer so interesting and makes me want to go back and try every single one of these games. There's always something creative, something eccentric, something that I've never seen before in their games. And this continues that trend. It makes me excited to go back and play Hipparchus again, because sometimes I'll be like, okay, that was kind of weird, but then it will sit on my shelf and it makes me want to pull it off and be like, you know what, I want to play that kind of weird game again because I can't stop thinking about it. And yet, I say this kind of interestingness, right? But for some people, that is also just called messy. And I can talk about this, I can get excited about this, I can say this is a very interesting thing, this is a very eccentric thing, but some people will see that and they will not see it as eccentric or interesting or this rough edge that gives it personality. They will see that as messy. I know this because that's exactly how Suma-chan is. She refuses to play this game with me again. And it all goes back to the first impressions. The overly big box, the messy rulebook. She sees these mechanics not as a stroke of eccentricity or originality. She sees it as, just like the rulebook, a mess. Something that wasn't cleaned up, that should have been cleaned up. A game that has 1 or 2 rules that feels so interesting also has 1 or 2 rules that just don't seem to fit with what the game is trying to do. And that's the thing that makes it hard about this game, because on one hand, I want to recommend this game because it is interesting for people who have a lot of trick takers that want something new in their collection. I think this is a great game to get a hold of. And yet at the same time, I can't do it without telling you that Suma-chan refuses to play this game again, that it does have problems in both the production, the rule book. There's 1 or 2 rules that just feel clunky. So we're going to compromise and come right down in the middle at a 1-star recommendation. I believe that if you are looking for a new trick taker that puts a little bit of spice in your collection, especially at a 2-player level, that does a couple of really clever things with trick taking, kind of feels like Scout at 2 players but a trick taker, then I think you should take a look at Hipparchus. But it's definitely not for people like Suma-chan that want a smooth, fluid, polished experience in a trick taker. I definitely understand both perspectives, but hopefully this video has helped you figure out which camp you belong in. Thank you so much for watching today. Arigatou gozaimashita. Until next time, じゃあね。